A machine that has never touched a single stone in Egypt was just asked who really built the pyramids. It did not hesitate. It did not dodge the question, and the answer it gave was not the one most people expected to hear. We typed a simple question into Grok, the artificial intelligence system built by xAI, trained on an enormous archive of scientific papers, survey data, historical records, and, yes, every fringe theory ever published on the internet. The question was direct. Who built the pyramids of Giza? What came back was not a myth. It was not a denial. It was something stranger than either. A cold, structured, almost clinical breakdown of exactly what the evidence supports, exactly what it does not, and exactly where the biggest gaps in human knowledge still sit, unresolved after 200 years of study. This is the story of that answer, what it got right, what it left open, and why the way an artificial intelligence handles an ancient mystery might tell us more about the limits of our own certainty than about the pyramids themselves. I am your name, and this is your channel. If unresolved mysteries backed by real evidence are what you come here for, subscribe now, because we go this deep every single week. This question matters more right now than it would have 5 years ago, because we finally have a tool capable of processing the entire body of published research on this subject faster than any single human scholar ever could, without the institutional pressures that shape which findings get promoted and which get quietly downplayed. That does not make an AI infallible. It makes it a different kind of witness. Before we get to what Grok said, you need to understand what Grok actually is. Grok is not a search engine. It does not go and look something up the way a human might type a question into a browser. It is a large language model, a system trained on hundreds of billions of words of human writing, and it generates its answers by identifying patterns across everything it has absorbed. That means when you ask it a question like this one, it is not consulting a single source. It is synthesizing across archaeology journals, engineering analyses, historical texts, documentary transcripts, online debates, and yes, the wilder corners of alternative history content that exist across the internet in equal measure to the peer-reviewed material. What makes this experiment genuinely interesting is that an AI system has no ego invested in either side of this debate. It does not have a career built on defending the conventional account. It does not have a channel built on promoting the fringe one. It has only the patterns in the data it was trained on, and how it weighs and reconciles those patterns is, in itself, a kind of test. A test of which explanation the sheer weight of available evidence actually supports when a machine with no personal stake in the outcome is forced to sort through all of it. It is also worth understanding what this experiment is not. It is not a seance, and it has no secret access to buried archives. Everything Grok knows about the pyramids it knows because a human being wrote it down and that writing was absorbed into its training data. Asking Grok. This question is really asking humanity's own written record to summarize itself honestly, stripped of the clickbait performance that usually surrounds this topic online. So we asked it, and the first thing Grok did was something almost no viral headline about this topic ever does. It gave a direct, unambiguous answer to the base question and then immediately explained why that answer, while true, does not resolve the entire mystery. The core of its response was this. The Great Pyramid of Giza was built during the reign of the pharaoh Khufu, roughly 4,500 years ago, by organized crews of skilled Egyptian laborers. Not slaves, but paid, fed, and medically supported workers operating under a centralized state logistics system. It pointed to the physical evidence behind this claim with the same precision a peer-reviewed paper would use. The worker village discovered at Giza, complete with bakeries capable of producing thousands of loaves of bread daily, breweries producing beer as part of the workers' rations, and burial grounds containing skeletons with healed bone fractures, physical proof that injured laborers were cared for rather than discarded. It cited the administrative papyrus, documents found decades ago and still being translated today that describe the daily movement of stone, food, and personnel with the kind of bureaucratic detail you would expect from a modern shipping company, not a myth. It named the quarry marks and painted work gang names, still visible on blocks deep inside the structure. Physical signatures left by real historical human beings who wanted their labor remembered. It even referenced the names some of these crews gave themselves, teams that called themselves things like Friends of Khufu, painted proudly in red ochre on the very stones they hauled into place, a detail that turns an anonymous mass of labor into individual people who took pride in a job they knew mattered. Grok noted that this detail alone tends to undercut the version of this story where the workforce was faceless, enslaved, or coerced without any stake in the outcome. On this part of the question, Grok's answer was not shocking at all. It was simply, calmly correct. Aliens did not build the pyramids. Slaves in chains did not build the pyramids. Organized, skilled, compensated Egyptian workers built the pyramids, and the paper trail proving it has existed for decades. But here is where the answers stop being predictable. And here is where you need to lean in, because this is the part almost nobody expects an AI to say out loud. Grok did not stop at confirming the human builders. It went further, and it told us, without being pushed, that confirming who built the structure does not fully explain how they achieved the precision found inside it. This is the pivot point of the entire experiment. And once you hear the numbers behind it, you will understand exactly why. The base of the Great Pyramid is level across its entire 230-meter length on every side to within roughly 2 centimeters. 2 centimeters of deviation across a stone platform larger than several football fields combined. The tools available to the builders were water-filled channels, knotted cords, and wooden right angles. No laser levels, no optical instruments, no satellite positioning, just rope, water, and wood on a desert plateau with natural variation in the ground beneath it. Grok laid this number out plainly and then noted, in almost the same breath, that multiple modern structural engineers, when asked to replicate the level of flatness across that scale using only period-appropriate tools, have described the task as extremely difficult to match even with contemporary surveying equipment. Read that again, slowly. Modern engineers with lasers and drones and GPS still find this number remarkable. Then came the orientation. The 4 faces of the Great Pyramid align with true geographic north, not magnetic north, which drifts and shifts, but the actual fixed rotational axis of the planet, with a margin of error of roughly 3 arc minutes. An arc minute is 1/60th of a single degree. 3 of them is a deviation so small the human eye cannot detect it without instruments. To achieve that alignment, the builders had to track the apparent rotation of the stars around a fixed point in the night sky, translate that invisible astronomical reference down into a physical line on the ground, and then hold that line perfectly straight across 230 meters of active construction for years without it drifting. They did this using copper tools in the 3rd millennium before the Common Era. Grok did not call this proof of a lost civilization. It called it, in its own generated language, an engineering achievement whose specific methodology remains only partially reconstructed by modern researchers, adding that several proposed reconstructions exist, but none has been definitively proven as the exact technique used. It mentioned that some researchers have proposed the builders used simple sighting instruments combined with nighttime observation across multiple seasons, cross-checking alignment against several stars rather than one, reducing the chance of error compounding across the build. But it framed this as a plausible reconstruction, not proven fact, since no such instrument has ever been physically recovered from the site. Now here is where the answer gets genuinely uncomfortable for people on both sides of this debate. And this is the part that actually shocked the people who first saw this exchange. Grok brought up the mathematics unprompted. It noted that when you take the full perimeter of the pyramid's base and divide it by twice its original height before the capstone was lost, the result lands remarkably close to pi, the mathematical constant governing the relationship between a circle's circumference and its diameter. A structure built entirely from straight lines and flat planes appears to encode the proportions of a circle. Grok offered the standard explanation immediately afterward that this may be an unintentional byproduct of a measuring method, possibly a rolling drum or cylinder used to count ground distance, which would naturally produce circular geometry without any deliberate mathematical intent behind it. But then, and this is the detail that made people stop scrolling, it added that this same ratio appears to recur at more than one independent point within the structure's proportions, in relationships that would not be produced by that same rolling tool, and that this recurrence is a detail current research has not fully explained. It said the same thing about the golden ratio, phi, roughly 1.618, a proportion found in the pyramid's slant height relative to its base, formally written down in mathematics by Greek scholars almost 2,000 years after Khufu's pyramid was completed, with no known Old Kingdom Egyptian document describing it by name. An artificial intelligence, built to be useful and accurate rather than sensational, told us plainly that a chunk of this structure's internal mathematics does not have a fully agreed upon explanation. Not that it proves anything supernatural, just that it is not yet fully explained. Those are 2 very different sentences, and the gap between them is exactly where this entire controversy has always lived. Grok also pointed out something rarely mentioned in either the skeptical or the sensational versions of this story, that similar proportional relationships appear when researchers analyze Khafre's pyramid and Menkaura's smaller structure standing nearby, and that when the 3 pyramids are studied together as a single spatial layout rather than 3 isolated buildings, their relative positioning and alignment show a level of coordinated planning that goes beyond what would be expected from 3 separate, unrelated construction projects simply built near one another over successive generations. That detail alone reframes the entire plateau, not as 3 monuments that happen to end up next to each other, but as one deliberately integrated site. But that is still not the most striking part of what Grok said. The most striking part came when we pushed further and asked about what lies beneath and inside the structure that has not yet been fully explored. Because here, the AI's answer shifted from historical synthesis to something closer to live, ongoing scientific uncertainty, and it laid out a timeline most casual viewers of this topic have never actually heard in full. In 2017, an international team working under the Scan Pyramids project, using a technique called muon tomography, which detects subatomic particles raining down from cosmic rays to map density variations inside solid stone, discovered a previously unknown void above the Grand Gallery inside the Great Pyramid. This was not a fringe claim. It was published in the journal Nature, peer-reviewed and independently verified. The void is estimated at over 30 meters long, and to this day, nobody knows exactly what it is. Not a chamber that has been entered, not a room with a name, just a void, confirmed to exist, its purpose, completely unknown. In 2023, a follow-up scan identified a narrow corridor near the pyramid's original entrance, later confirmed with a small robotic camera. Grok listed both of these findings as fully established, credible, mainstream science, no asterisks attached. It added an important technical clarification. Most coverage of this topic skips entirely that muon tomography does not photograph anything the way a camera does. It works by measuring how many naturally occurring cosmic particles pass through solid stone versus empty space, and it produces a kind of density map rather than a picture. That is precisely why the 2017 team was so careful to call their finding a void rather than a room. The technology can prove that empty space exists behind meters of solid limestone. It cannot yet tell anyone what that space was built for, how it was accessed originally, or whether human hands have entered it in over 4,000 years. Then it addressed the announcement that shook the archaeological world in March of 2025, when a research team using synthetic aperture radar combined with AI image processing claimed to have detected an enormous network of structures beneath the Giza Plateau, extending to depths of roughly 648 meters. And here, Grok's honesty became almost startling for a machine most people assume exists to generate excitement. It flagged, on its own, that mainstream geophysicists have raised serious technical concerns about whether radar imaging at that depth through dense limestone is physically achievable with current technology, and that no independent team has yet replicated those results using separate equipment. It did not dismiss the claim outright. It simply refused to call it confirmed. It told us, essentially, that this is a live scientific dispute, not a settled discovery, and that anyone presenting it as proven fact right now is getting ahead of the evidence. It went further, noting that the reported depth of over 600 meters would place these structures roughly twice as deep as the tallest skyscrapers on Earth stand tall, inverted straight down through solid rock, a scale several geophysicists described as difficult to reconcile with how far radar signals can meaningfully penetrate dense limestone before the return signal degrades beyond reliable interpretation. Now here is where this story takes its final turn, and it is the reason this particular exchange spread the way it did. We asked Grok one last, more pointed question. If the human builders are documented, and the tools are documented, and the workforce is documented, why does this topic still generate this much genuine scientific disagreement decades after the workers' village was excavated? And its answer was not defensive. It was, honestly, the most human thing about the entire exchange. It said that the gap between confirmed historical fact and unresolved technical mystery is exactly the space where speculation always grows, and that the responsible position is not to pretend the mystery does not exist, and not to fill that gap with unverified claims either, but to hold both facts at once. The builders were human. The precision they achieved remains, in several specific respects, not fully explained by the tools we know they had access to. That answer will not satisfy people looking for a clean, dramatic conclusion, and it will not satisfy people looking to have their skepticism fully confirmed either. It sits exactly in the uncomfortable middle, and that discomfort is, according to the data itself, exactly where the science currently stands. Zahi Hawass, the Egyptian archaeologist who spent decades as Secretary General of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities, publicly confirmed in 2025 that new corridors have been identified inside the Great Pyramid using muon tomography and ground-penetrating radar together, with a full announcement expected in 2026. He stated plainly that no alien or supernatural explanation is required, and that the human achievement is extraordinary enough on its own. Coming from the most senior Egyptologist associated with this site for the past 30 years, that statement carries real weight. And it lines up, almost point for point, with what an artificial intelligence with no career, no reputation, and no channel to protect concluded when it was simply asked to weigh the evidence. So what did we actually learn by asking a machine this question? We learned that when you remove ego, tribalism, and the pressure to pick a side entirely from the equation, the honest answer to who built the pyramids was never really in doubt. Human beings built them. Documented, named, fed, and cared for human beings. What remains genuinely unresolved is not who, but exactly how they reached a level of precision that still challenges modern engineers equipped with instruments those builders could never have imagined. Grok did not give us aliens. It did not give us a lost civilization. It gave us something rarer than either. It gave us a machine willing to say, clearly and without flinching, that some of what happened at Giza 4,500 years ago has not been fully explained yet, and that saying so out loud is not a failure of science. It is what honest science actually sounds like. The stones at Giza have survived every empire that has risen and fallen since they were placed. They have outlasted the pharaohs who commissioned them, the Greeks who wrote about them, and the modern nations that now study them with radar and satellites and subatomic particle detectors. And now, for the first time in their 4,500-year history, they have been asked about by a machine that has never seen them with its own eyes and never will. And that machine, built from the sum total of everything humanity has ever written down, still could not close the final gap. Maybe that is the real answer here. Not that the mystery is solved, and not that it never will be, but that even our most advanced tools, the ones we built specifically, to find patterns we cannot see ourselves, still stand in front of the Great Pyramid and say, honestly, there is more here than we current Y understand. Subscribe now if you want to be here for whatever gets found next. Drop a comment below telling us which part of this answer surprised you the most, and share this with someone who thinks this question was ever fully settled, because the evidence itself says otherwise, and